one tip that I found was that a lot of teams actually don't have great ramp-up guide, and managers are always finding someone who's willing to take time to do that. I recently joined a new company as a software engineer. Being new to the team means that there are a lot of new things to learn. New programming languages, new tools, new processes. This can be a very exciting period, but it can also be a very stressful and frustrating period for a lot of people because it's new, there are a lot of things to pick up. Over the years, I've learned several tricks and tips that help me navigate this period. And in this video, I wanted to share what those things are and how they can help you ramp up in a new team.
If there's no easy way to go around this, I think experience really matters in this case, and especially when you're trying to ramp up on a new the very first time, so many things can go wrong or not the way that you expect. For me, it felt like I had to try to meet as many people as possible. I had to learn a programming language, building things in PHP and JavaScript. Both I haven't really used in a long time, and I started my career using Java and Scala. So this was something that I had to learn really quickly in order to be productive. They use Visual Studio Code, which is not something I'm very familiar with. Throughout my career, I've mostly used IntelliJ or Sublime Text. So trying to switch into Visual Studio Code and be productive on there and being able to do all the things I was previously able to do on IntelliJ required some learning and investment. When I join a new team, usually there's so many things that are unclear to me. I feel like I'm just sitting in this pool and I'm drowning in all this water that's coming at me at all different directions. And it's really stressful and it's suffocating. So one of the tips I found really helpful in this situation is to lean on my support network. So a support network is people that you've usually interacted with before you even join it. So your manager, the people who interview with, or even your recruiter. These are all people who have interacted with you and people who have actually voted for you to be in that team in the first place. So they're there to make sure that you actually succeed. So that was one thing that I found really helpful and empowering, because when I finally realized that there's this support network for me, that I'm not alone in actually joining a new team, it was liberating because I know I can rely on them. I can ask them questions and they're there to help me succeed. No one really wants a new hire to just fail, right? That's not the whole goal of hiring someone new. People get hired because they saw the potential in them. So you're that potential star and people want to make sure that you fully realize your potential. So rely on your support network. Don't let all the pressure come at, and don't drown in that by yourself, because you're not alone. You have a support network. Lean on your peers, your manager, your recruiter, anyone they've interacted with and might be able to help you solve problems that you're facing right now. The next tip that I found really helpful is ask questions. Don't be afraid to challenge the status quo. As you're the new person on the team, that's the best time to ask questions because you're trying to understand how things work and you're trying to ramp up as quickly as you can. So any question that you're asking are legitimate questions because you're trying to ramp up and you're trying to engage with the problem. So that's a really good sign. People really want to see people who are willing to engage the problem and tackle them head on. So there are not really any silly questions at point, because guess what? People are really excited to see the new hire actually asking questions because it shows that they're thinking about the problem. They're excited. They're trying to tackle and solve the problem. And what's worse, right? Do you want to have someone who's not really asking any questions and not really engaging with the problem, and you're not really sure if they're actually learning or curious or even passionate about the problem space? Or on the other hand, you have someone who's really passionate and asking a lot of questions and they really want to get to the root of the problem and really try to understand what the problem is all about. Between these two, which one would you actually prefer? So when you change that mindset and think of it from that perspective, asking questions is actually a really powerful motivator for you as a new hire. And it's also a good signal that your manager is for it, your peers are looking, because sometimes you might even uncover gems that they're hidden deep down in how your code is structured. Because a lot of times these software are written years and years ago where no one really understood what was the context behind them, what were the assumptions being made at the time. And a lot of times those assumptions might have changed already. So that's gonna help you design and write a better software because you now have a full context on how it was built and why it was built. And if those assumptions no longer exist, then you can rewrite them, and that will be a great win for you. Next tip that I found really helpful when I was joining and ramping up is document everything, write everything down. People's brains have limited capacity, and when you're ramping up, there's so many things that you have to learn. Programming languages, syntax, processes, all those things, you can't possibly hold all of them in your mind and expect to remember them 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month later on. So one of the things I really like to do is I start a Google Doc on the first day that I
and I write everything down in that Google Doc. Anything that I learned, syntax, people, tidbits of knowledge that I found helpful, I throw all of that into a Google Doc. And what happens later on is, one, I have a reference material. I can always refer back to it later on if I have to pick something up or refresh my memory. And two, it's gonna help me refresh and identify some of the gaps in my knowledge. When I do my review, that's when I realize, hey, maybe there are some gaps in my knowledge that I need to close right there. This paper trail of digital footprint is gonna help me review, refresh, and reinforce some of the learnings that I've done in the ramping up process. And number three, the great part about this is that it's gonna serve as a reference material and also a potential ramp up guide for other new hires. Imagine if you're going through this journey and you've learned certain things and you figured something was really tricky and you've managed to solve that. It's really valuable to other potential new hires as well, because they're probably gonna run into things. And one tip that I found was that a lot of teams actually don't have great ramp up guide, and managers are always finding someone who's willing to take time to do that. And you as a new hire, that's the best time to actually do it, because other engineers are probably busy working on their projects or trying to ship something. They don't really have time to just sit there and spend 2 weeks, 3 weeks working on a ramp up. So that's a really quick win for you as a new hire, because as you're spending time putting that doc, it's gonna help you ramp up quickly, and it's gonna help other engineers ramp up quickly when they join as well. And your manager is gonna thank you for that as well, because they're gonna see that this person has taken the initiative to actually improve the process and team and help others succeed. So it's a win-win for you and the team and the manager and all the new. Next tip, invest time in learning the tools and processes well. When I join a new team, there's always usually a new set of tools or programming languages or processes that I have to learn. And it's really tricky. Every team is slightly different. They might use Visual Studio Code for their IDE, or they might use IntelliJ, or they might use Sublime Text. There's so many different tools out there, and there's always friction involved when you're trying to learn a new tool. I would always recommend spending time to actually learn some of those tools and learn them well. For example, setting up key maps or setting up shortcuts for the commands that you know you're gonna use a lot. IDE like IntelliJ, for example, I usually have something for refactoring code really quickly or jumping into certain definitions. It's really helpful because when I'm doing some sort of code archaeology to understand bugs and root causes, it's gonna save me a lot of time because I don't have to click in order to get what I want. I can just use a shortcut, and that's gonna bring me to the definition of code really quick. So every time I use something like that, it's probably gonna shave me off like 5 to 10 minutes of time. And that compounds, because every time that you do that, it's gonna save you 5 to 10 minutes. And if you imagine, if you do that 10 times a day, it's gonna be 50 minutes. And over the course of a week, that's about 5 to 6 hours of saved time. And that's how you get to be a more productive engineer. You don't get to be a more productive engineer by working more hours. You get to be a more productive engineer by, you don't get to be a productive engineer by putting in more hours. You get to be a more productive engineer by being more effective with how you use your time. And that's what I found to be one of the biggest liberators of my time. If you're joining a new team, my advice to you is make sure you ask your support network. Ask them what are the tools, what are the processes that I've used a lot and found really helpful, and can they recommend something for you so that it works for your situation, and make sure that you invest time into it. Now, you might ask, do I have dedicated time when I ramp up to actually learn all these things? And the answer is no. You're not gonna get any dedicated time unless you create time for it yourself. So what I do is on my calendar, I have fixed schedule. So what I do is on my calendar, I have fixed slots where I make sure that no one interrupts me, and I spend that time just focusing on learning the tool. That's something that I create for myself. Make sure that I have time during ramp up to learn about the tools and make sure I am familiar and feel comfortable making changes using the tools that are available to me. Next tip, make sure you have a concrete ramp up plan. When you're ramping up and joining as a new team, make sure that you have a 15-day, 30-day, and 45-day plan for how you are supposed to ramp up. You should have specific milestones on things that you're expected to achieve or ship by those dates. What that achieves is it makes sure that you and your manager are fully aligned on what you're supposed to do and what you're expected to perform at for the next 15, 30, and 45 days. And it also sets you up for success because you know exactly what is expected of you and you know what you need to do in order to deliver those things by those dates. The worst thing that could happen when you're joining a new team is you don't have a ramp up plan and you don't have a mentor. You're just being pushed into a pool of code and you're expected to do something, but it's not clear when you're supposed to do it, or where you're gonna get resources to do it, or if there's anyone who's gonna mentor you as you're learning the new code base. That's the worst. So make sure that you're talking to your manager, your mentor if you have one, to come up with a reasonable ramp up plan with specific milestones for 15 days, 30 days, 45 days, and make sure even your skip manager, your manager's manager, is aware of the things that you're expected to ship. Once that is very clear and you're aligned with your manager, your mentor, your skip manager, that's when you have fully set yourself up for success. If your manager is not aware of what a ramp up plan is or hasn't come up with one for you, take the lead yourself. Come up with a ramp up plan yourself. Put up a simple Google Docs, write down your 15, 30, 45 days on the things that you want to do and what you're expected to achieve for yourself. Ask your manager for sign off. Make sure that they're aware of here's your plan and how you plan to achieve. If you don't think that's a good idea, talk to your mentor. Ask them what are the things they expect you to do and what is reasonable for your level to be performing. So that's gonna help you succeed in the short and long term. Joining a new team or a company can be a really stressful and frustrating period for a lot of people. And whenever you think that you're drowning in frustration or overwhelmed by all the things that you have to learn, I hope that this video is going to help you ramp up and think about all the things that you can do to alleviate some of that stress. Try to lean on your support network, ask them for questions and feedback and guidance on how you can move forward and what are the most important things that you should learn. Write down everything and make sure that you're spending time to periodically review them and make sure that you don't have any knowledge gaps. And talk to your manager, talk to your mentors, and try to figure out, make sure that you're on the right track. Hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a comment below. I would love to hear what's your best tip for someone who's ramping up on a new team for the very first time.